Today my plan was to direct sow a ton of fall seeds, and I also wanted to transplant out all of my tomato starts. But after I saw the rat last night, okay, pause. I need to rewind back to last night so I can tell you everything from the beginning. It was, as it always is, a dark, windy, stormy night. As I speared my diver into the garden soil, an eerie feeling washed over me. In prior days, I'd rush out the back door for a few minutes at a time to observe the garden. One day, I noticed a pomegranate on the ground. The first culprit that came to mind was a rodent, but I quickly convinced myself that it must have been a bird. I'd see them in the garden at all hours. These weren't the usual birds that flock to Serendipity. Larger, messier, and more brazen, their presence had turned my once orderly garden into a scene of chaos, leaving trampled beds in their wake. Once I convinced myself that the birds were to blame, the thought of rodents slipped from my mind. Yet as the days wore on, strange occurrences in the garden became more frequent. First, tags from the tomato starts began vanishing from underneath my porch. What began as 1 or 2 missing tags amidst so many trays quickly grew into a daily mystery as more vanished. Then I noticed fruit gone or torn apart. I blamed the birds again, as I had seen them damage other plants in the past. The reality is, summers are rough not only due to the temperatures, but also because of all the wild creatures that come down from the mountains seeking food, water, and shelter from the heat waves. In other words, no matter how many times I battled rodents and banished them from the garden, the following summer, a new pack was ready to take their place. I knew it was inevitable, yet I wasn't ready to face them trespassing into my garden again. So I created somewhat reasonable explanations for the odd happenings in Serendipity. On this particular night, the atmosphere was thick with an unsettling tension. Goosebumps prickled my skin as the lightning intermittently revealed bits and pieces of the garden. Gusts of wind rustled the dry leaves still dangling from trellises and shook the canopy of nearby trees. The storm's howls seemed to amplify my own fears, making the garden feel even more intimidating. Though the setting was daunting, I was driven by the rare chance of a rain shower that could give my plants a good start. Determined, I got to work. I knew I couldn't get all my tomato starts into the ground, but I could at least begin with a few. I selected the biggest ones, figuring they had outgrown their containers and would appreciate more growing space. I tiptoed around the garden, careful to avoid spiders and their webs. After a while, I began to relax as the cool, crumbly soil greeted me, its earthy scent soothing my senses with each trowelful I scooped out. As I planted, I daydreamed about a million different adventures in Serendipity. I was so lost in a vision of a lush, bountiful fall harvest that I almost didn't notice a dark shape moving through the heart of the garden. It was only when a flash of lightning illuminated the garden path that I saw it. A familiar shadow creeping closer. The rat was a bulky mass of coarse fur, and it moved with surprising swiftness as its long, hairless tail trailed behind like a whip. Frozen in fear, I watched as the rat drew closer. The storm's roars and the wind's howls filled the night alongside my own blood-curdling scream. Panic surged through me and I bolted towards the house. My feet tore through spider webs as I pounded the ground in my frantic escape. I slammed the door shut behind me with trembling hands. My heart continued racing. I stumbled over words as I recounted the encounter to my husband, who was already preparing for bed. We returned outside together, searching in the dim light for any sign of the rat. But we found nothing. That night, I lay in bed, tossing and turning. My mind raced with thoughts of the rat slinking through the garden. I imagined it lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. I'd have to be more vigilant, but I couldn't let this slow me down. I'd neglected Serendipity for far too long, and it was about time I got the garden back under control. The plans had to change, and I need to tidy up the garden before I move forward. because I need this rodent out of here. Last night when I saw it, it looked very different. It looked a little bit lighter in color, and I didn't see how long it was. I just saw how like wide it was, and it looked like a really big one. So I'm kind of worried that it might be pregnant, and I need to get this back in order so that the rats don't keep multiplying. Because last year I spent most of the year trying to get rid of a rat infestation, and once they start multiplying, it is so hard to get control of them. Once the garden is back in order, I'll be able to focus on continuing with my fall garden, but this is the priority right now. So I'm going to show you what the garden looks like so that you know what needs to get cleaned up, and then we'll go from there. Also, it's like 106 degrees right now, which sounds insane, and I mean I'm sweating like crazy, but at least the sun is not out anymore. It's nice and cloudy, and it looks like it might start raining soon, so I'm hoping for rain, but I'm not going to get my hopes up because last night I could smell the rain and it never arrived. So I'm just gonna get to work leaf blowing everything. This is what the garden looks like right now. As you can see, I've already started leaf blowing all of the leaves out of the crevices. Because I do a lot of container gardening, there's always little areas like this that can get full of dried leaves or dried foliage, and that makes perfect nests for the rodents. So I'm just trying to leaf blow every single crevice. The garden beds themselves are looking so pretty, but the pathways, oh, the pathways are looking a little bit rough. And then look right there. That is exactly what I need to get rid of. All of that foliage needs to go. I direct sowed some stuff last night, so nothing's popping up yet, of course, but hopefully over the next few weeks we see a lot of pumpkins and squash sprouting. And then this morning I did manage to plant a couple of tomatoes. I didn't do all of them though because I want to do the rest of them with you guys. And then yeah, this is what the rest of the garden looks like. It's not too bad. The pathways are kind of messy, but they're manageable. Is that a fig? Why do I feel like I'm walking into a trap? Oh, that is a fig. It's one of my neighbor's figs. Okay, I want to be honest with you though. I've tried these before and they're not very sweet. They're like really dry on the inside. And then I already have some rat traps, but those are brand new. I just didn't set them off because my cat Mika comes out here all the time and I didn't want to risk her getting hurt. But I need to leaf blow all of this too. And now it makes sense, now that I saw the rat, why I've found so many figs that look like this. At first I thought those were the birds doing the damage, but then I had to be honest with myself and realize that I haven't seen birds on this side of the yard at all. Man, these guavas by now would have been so good, but they're rock hard. I think they just got cooked on the tree. And then let me show you the other side of the yard. So you can see all of this mess right here. It kind of looks like fall over on this side of the garden because there's just brown everywhere. Okay, so this is the before. Remember the mess, so that we can appreciate the after a lot more. First, I'm gonna try and place this tree wherever I think it'll fit. I kind of want to put it in this corner. I want to move a lot of these containers out of the way and place it right here, only because it's in a gray container and all of my other containers are black, and if I just have one gray one just randomly placed, I feel like it's gonna look very weird. And I have a couple of white and gray ones scattered around this area, so I think it'll look good if it's here. And that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put it right here. But first I need a leaf blow and move everything away. The containers that I'm moving right now are 5-gallon containers that I got for free. Well, kind of. They're the ones that the trees came in that I've planted throughout my entire garden. And instead of getting rid of them, I like to reuse them and plant things like herbs, like mint, rosemary, and even some eggplant. The eggplant has done really good. Right now it's looking a little bare, but that's just because the hornworms got to it. And they're all set up on drip irrigation. Otherwise, they can dry out very easily because they're on the smaller side. Oh no! I accidentally pulled out my peanut plant and I had little peanuts already growing. No! Oh shoot, damn it. You guys, look at my little peanuts. Oh my god. Oh, I'm so mad at myself. Dang it. Okay. Hopefully there's still some peanuts left in there or something. my gloves actually. Ew. Ew. Oh, that's disgusting. It literally rotted on there. Ew. One of the biggest positives to growing things in containers of all sizes is that I'm able to change my mind and move things around rather easily if I feel like it, or if I want to find a new spot for another plant, like I'm trying to do for this sweet lime tree. If I had all of these in ground, it would be a lot more difficult, though it wouldn't be impossible. However, the downside to it is that whenever it comes to cleaning them up or cleaning behind them, it can be a little tedious because I have to move everything out of the way, because having so many containers means that there's a lot of little nooks and crannies that rodents or other creatures can start nesting in. So that's the one thing I don't like about it, but I feel like it's a pretty easy fix and one I'm willing to deal with in order to be able to grow an abundance of food in my garden. Whoa, let me see how that looks. Okay. So I actually don't like how this color looks right here, because it's like a little gray scattered over there, all black, and all of a sudden one gray pot over here. Maybe if I put the black ones around it, I'll like how it looks better. Let me take a look at that. Let me see. That looks better, but I'm not 100% sold. I think I'd actually prefer it in this corner, even if it does stand out a little bit more. Once my husband builds the kids a little clubhouse, I think it won't look bad because the clubhouse will be a lighter color too. So I'm gonna have to move it all the way over here. But that means I need to leaf blow all of this first before moving it over. So let's do that. Because half of my yard is covered in turf, and I know I regret it too. I think it's one of my biggest regrets, and if I could go back and change it, I would. But I can't right now, especially since I have so many containers and each of them weigh a couple 100 pounds each. The only way that I'm able to clean it thoroughly and actually get it to looking a little bit more presentable and pristine is by using a leaf blower. So when we first got it installed, they recommended using one of those brushes to brush it out. And while that works, it's very difficult whenever I have a lot of foliage that dries up and falls into it, because it kind of just goes in between every single little blade. And the one thing that I found works really well is using a leaf blower. And this one I actually got on Amazon. It was around 25 bucks or so, maybe even a little bit less. I don't know if they still sell it, but the brand is Sunjo and it's an electric one. And the reason I went with this one, it was because it was one of the most inexpensive ones I found, and it had pretty good reviews. And in my opinion, I think it works really well. It's small, but it's powerful, though it is very loud and it does need to be plugged in, which I think in my case kind of works out because my yard isn't that big, and it makes cleaning up a lot easier. So what I like to do is leaf blow everything to one corner of the yard, and then I go in and pick it up. And then using a leaf blower also helps me to get anything out from in between the crevices of all of the containers. Otherwise, doing it by hand would take forever. And even with the leaf blower, it still takes me quite a while, but it does make the process go a little bit faster. These Rosboro blackberries are starting to come back. But truthfully, I've been wanting to remove these for a while now, because while they are productive, they're also extremely thorny and a pain to keep up with. So rarely do I ever regret planting anything in serendipity except for these Rosboro blackberries. So the backstory behind them is when I first started gardening, I did a lot of research on what would grow here in my zone, especially in the low desert of Arizona. And as I was doing research online, I kept seeing the Rosboro blackberry variety being recommended for the low desert, so I figured this is the one I should plant. The only thing that I noticed people mentioning is that it had thorns, but I figured thorns aren't that big of a deal. I'll just wear gloves. It can't be that bad. Well, it was that bad. When I first planted them, they were bare roots and they didn't take off right away because I was still trying to figure out my watering, so they struggled for a while. Especially during the summertime, they would start to die back and then they would just come back once the weather cooled down. But one thing I noticed is every single cane had hundreds, if not thousands, of tiny little thorns that are not like rose thorns. Instead, they're like mini little needles everywhere. Not just on the canes, but on the stems of the leaves and on the underside of the leaves. Harvesting the blackberries was nothing short of a nightmare. I dreaded picking them because every single time, no matter how careful I tried to be, if I wasn't wearing gloves, I would get tons and tons of little thorns stuck all over my fingers and my hands. So my kids weren't able to harvest them for that reason. And as the plants continued maturing and growing even more, the thorns kept coming out bigger and bigger, and it seemed like there was more every single time. And in this case, as I was cleaning them up, I tried to keep them intact as much as possible because even cutting them into smaller pieces with my pruners meant that there would be thorns flying everywhere, especially when they've dried out and they've lignified. So that's why you see me trying to take them apart in large chunks to avoid having thorns go everywhere. Because once they go into the turf, it's also really hard for me to get them out. Something else that I learned about blackberries is that they can be very, very invasive. And I'm happy that I planted them in containers, but even in these containers, they tried escaping several times through the drainage holes, and I even caught suckers popping up through the turf in different areas nearby. So keep that in mind if you plant them in your garden or in your yard, that they most likely will try and take over, and it's really hard to get rid of them. Even as I cut them back right now, I know this is not going to be the end of this project. I'm probably going to have to get rid of the soil or sift through it very, very meticulously to get rid of any sort of fruit, because leaving even one intact means the whole plant can just come back. So if I have one regret, it's planting this variety instead of a thornless one, because this one dies back during the summer anyways. So I might as well just have gone with one that didn't have thorns so that my family and I could have a better time picking them, because berries are very expensive at the store, and that's the whole reason I wanted to grow them myself in the first place. Look at some of those monstrous thorns. Oh. It was so hot today that the bag is basically melted into itself. Look at this. Alright, I'm working on chopping this one down, and these gloves I think are way too worn down to where I can feel all of the thorns, but I have these that I barely got to use and I can't feel anything with them. So I really like that. The only bad thing is I couldn't find the other one, so I'll have to look for it. Though, look at all those thorns. After I chopped back the blackberry canes from the 15-gallon container, the job was far from over, because once I started trying to get them into the black trash bags, I came across another problem, which was that the canes were so thorny that they kept ripping through the bag very easily. And even just trying to get them into the bag was really hard because they kept snagging and poking holes in it. So I got to a point where I was feeling very frustrated and annoyed, because not only were the canes very difficult to clean up, the thorns kept getting into my shoes as well, because I was wearing Crocs, which was the most horrible choice of shoe to use in this case scenario. Usually when I'm out gardening, I love wearing my Crocs because they're breathable, they're very comfortable, and I have really white feet. So it just helps me get work done without feeling tired and without getting blisters or anything. But in this case, because I was dealing with so many thorns, it meant that thorns could get through every single little hole, and they did get in many, many times. And not just that, they kept snagging onto my clothes and my legs. So I was all scratched up. I was tired. I was irritated. And I feel like I should have chosen better shoes like steel-toed boots or something, because these blackberry canes were making me regret every life choice I'd ever made, especially the one where I decided to plant these in the first place. Ow, ow, ow. Ow, 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 ow. Ow. Oh, I can't wait to get rid of these. Ow. Ow, ow, ow. The worst thing about these is that not only do they have thorns on the stems, but also going down the leaves, they have little thorns. The sun is starting to go down, so I don't think I'm gonna have enough time to finish leaf blowing, but I will be able to finish picking up all of the blackberries, and I think I'm gonna be happy with that. When I first came outside today, my main goal was to clean up the garden and to move the sweet lime tree into its new home. And as you can see, even though those are very simple tasks, cleaning up a garden can oftentimes take a lot more time than one realizes. And this is part of gardening that I used to not show as much because I felt like people would get discouraged seeing how difficult it can be. But now I realize that it's very, very important for me to show this side of gardening, because gardening takes a lot of work. And yes, it is fun to harvest and to plant seeds and to transplant starts, but there's also a lot of maintenance and upkeep that needs to be done. And even when I have simple projects like cleaning up the backyard, it can often take several days, especially when it's really hot outside. And it's definitely not my favorite part of gardening, but it's one that I feel is very important for me to share, because serendipity doesn't look perfect all the time. In fact, the majority of the summer, it looks very fried and brown, and it can be very exhausting at times to keep it looking pristine. Honestly, it's kind of impossible to keep it looking perfect all year round, and that's something that I've come to learn, and that's something that I embrace now. Working really hard on days like today makes me appreciate the days when I can relax a little bit more and do all of the fun stuff. And I think I've also learned to not be so hard on myself. Even though I wanted to do so much more, the sun is going down, and it's impossible for me to finish up the entire yard in one evening. But some progress is still progress, and a garden takes time. And I just want to remind you of that in case your garden isn't looking the best right now and you have to clean up and you're feeling overwhelmed. Just know that it's okay to chip away at it a little at a time, because eventually it will get done and then you'll get to do all of the fun stuff. But sometimes it takes a little while to get there. I didn't get to finish because the sun is almost all the way down and I can't keep leaf blowing because I have neighbors. So I'm going to finish up in the next few days. But I'm going to show you what I did get done, because I think it looks a lot better, a lot emptier, but that just means I'm going to have a lot more space to start over again. So let me show you. There's still some leaves behind the big containers, but that I can take care of. I just had to make sure I got all of the stuff that I needed to clear out first. I still need to work on these trellises where I need to remove all of those dead tomatoes, and that way I can plant some new ones. And this is what this area looks like. Honestly, on camera, maybe it still looks the same, but in person, I promise you, it looks a lot better. Look at that. A lot better. It's just that there's so many dry things that I really need to replace. Once all of the dry tomatoes are taken care of and everything's topped with fresh compost, I think it'll look a lot cleaner and you'll really be able to see it coming back to life. So that's the end of today. Time to go inside.